Question. Hello. There is a problem involving outer human gurus, especially in Eastern traditions. In fact, all Eastern traditions, Hindu, Buddhist and Islamic Sufi traditions. They say that a human teacher is absolutely required in order to walk the spiritual path, and you cannot connect to God or receive anything from God and heaven except through a human guru. They have no awareness of our inner teachers, both our Christ self and ascended teachers. They do, however, sometimes acknowledge ascended beings, but we cannot connect to them directly. We still need a qualified human teacher in order to benefit from the ascended beings. Could you please comment on this? Well, yes. You can take two basic approaches here. First of all, why do you have spiritual traditions? And again, there can be two reasons for this. One is for people's protection. Because if you have a spiritual tradition that goes way back in time, that is found, it has a certain teaching, it has a certain practice, and it has been applied by many people over time, then obviously you can say you have a basis of practical experiences that this actually works for people. And you can also say that there are, of course, always a certain danger in spiritual pursuits, in the sense that it can open your mind up to various lower forces. I talk about in several videos how we have the 4 levels of the material universe. There's the identity, mental, emotional, and physical realm. And in the emotional and mental and lower identity realms, there are certain beings there that are not ascended beings and therefore have a limited perspective on things. Some of them have, the intention to steal your energy. And so there are spiritual people throughout the ages who have made themselves open to these forces. So you can say that when you have a tradition, it is meant to protect you from being influenced by these forces, because here is a program that has been proven to work and that has been repeated over time and so forth and so on. So there can be validity to this. However, the other reason for having these traditions is to control people. And you can see this most clearly in traditional religion, where there's always this fear-based element of don't consider anything that's not biblical or you'll burn forever in hell. And so if you look at it historically, you can see that basically you can say there's nothing on earth that can't be perverted by the ego, by the duality consciousness, and what I call the false teachers or the fallen beings. Anything can be perverted. So you can look at this. I mean, I understand what the person is saying. They say that a human teacher is absolutely required in order to walk the spiritual path. I understand that if you have a human teacher who has reached a certain level of consciousness, who has followed a path to get there, then that teacher obviously has experience and can guide a new student so that the new student doesn't have to make the same mistakes or go into the same pitfalls as the teacher has done, or as people in the tradition have done. So if you can find a qualified teacher, of course this can be very helpful. Of course, the flip side of this is, what if the teacher is a false teacher, a manipulative teacher that has a selfish desire to steal people's energy or whatever it may be? Then if you believe that you can only make progress by following that teacher, you're going to be loyal to the teacher, and you're going to perhaps allow the teacher to abuse you in various ways because you think this is the only way for you to make spiritual progress. So of course you have examples of this as well. So as I said, nothing is foolproof or ego-proof. It just can't be done. Now, when you say this, you cannot connect to God or receive anything from God and heaven except through a human guru. This I fundamentally disagree with. Fundamentally disagree with. Because if you say this, you're no longer in the mystical tradition. You may have a guru tradition that's not a formal religion like Hinduism or Buddhism, but you're not a mystic, because the entire idea of mysticism, reaching all the way back as far as we have recorded history, even in Hinduism and the Vedic teachings, the entire idea of mysticism is anybody has the potential to have mystical experiences of directly contacting the spiritual realm. That's mysticism. If you say you can't do this without something or someone outside yourself, this is just traditional religion, where Christianity will say you can't be saved without the Catholic Church. It's the same as an Indian guru or tradition saying you can't connect to God without a human guru. I mean, this is just, this is definitely for control purposes. So you always have these two. You have the traditional religion where they say you need something outside yourself in order to be saved or contact spirit. Then you have mysticism where they say no, you can contact spirit within yourself. But as I said, there is of course a danger to this, because who knows whether you are contacting the spiritual realm where there are ascended masters, or you are contacting the emotional, mental, and identity realm where there are beings who may be deceptive. So again, if you have a valid spiritual tradition, it can be helpful. That's why I'm not giving a yes or no answer to the question, because there is no yes or no answer. And then it goes on to say, they have no awareness of our inner teachers, both our Christ self and ascended teachers. They do sometimes acknowledge ascended beings, but they say we can't connect to them directly. We still need a qualified human teacher. And again, I fundamentally disagree with that. I have, since 2002, been trained by the Ascended Masters to take dictations and direct teachings from them, which I published on my many websites and in my many books. So there's an enormous amount of material that's available for free there. And this comes directly from the Ascended Masters with minimal coloring and influence from me. But in all of these teachings, the Masters have never said that you can't connect to the Masters directly. They have never said you need me. Never ever said that you need a human messenger in order to contact the Ascended Masters. In fact, the entire purpose of the teachings of the Ascended Masters is to help you establish your own direct inner connection to them. I am just here as a tool for helping you establish that connection, but the real role for the real goal of my job is to make myself not needed anymore, so that you can have your own connection to the Masters. That's the whole point here. So some people they have developed a connection to the Ascended Masters in past lifetimes, and it just needs to be awakened in this lifetime. Others might have some psychology they need to overcome before they can establish that connection to the Masters. But the last thing I would ever want is to be a hindrance for someone establishing their personal connection to the Ascended Masters. So basically what the Masters are saying, we are giving general teachings through a human messenger, but the goal of these teachings is that you take them to establish a personal connection to the Masters, so you can get personalized directions from the Masters that don't come through me or anybody else. It doesn't mean you can't be helped by working with people like, for example, therapists or counselors or advisors. It's not that. But still, the goal of the Ascended Masters has never been to make you codependent on any human messenger or human institution. It's always a matter of independent, making you eventually independent of this. And I understand that there are spiritual traditions that don't acknowledge Ascended Masters. And there's a reason for this. It can be that they are influenced by, as I said, they are fallen beings. The last thing they want is for people on earth to acknowledge the existence of ascended masters. Because the ascended masters are our way, our only way, really, for escaping the influence of the fallen beings. I explained this in my video about how the world was created. And so they want to either hide the existence of ascended masters or discredit the ascended masters and teachings. And so that's why you can have these traditions that does not acknowledge ascended masters. And if they don't acknowledge that they are genuine spiritual beings that can serve as our teachers, what is their only option? The only option is to say, you need a human guru from our tradition, because our tradition is the only valid one, or at least one of the valid ones, and therefore this is your only way forward. There are two problems with this. And one problem is that many of these traditions, like Hindu and Buddhist traditions, they were established a long time ago. Buddhism 2,500 years ago, Hinduism even further back. So things are constantly moving on. There are new spiritual cycles. Most spiritual people know about the age of Pisces. We're moving into the age of Aquarius. But the other thing is that, as I explained in several videos, that the collective consciousness is being raised all the time. That means that new teachings can be given forth. And that's why there is an inherent weakness in any spiritual tradition that is looking backwards and not looking forwards. That's not open to new ideas, which is what I call progressive revelation, where the ascended masters release new ideas because they can see that the collective consciousness has been raised to a level where it's ready for these ideas to be released. And so these traditions that are looking back, they don't acknowledge the growth in the collective consciousness, the change of cycles, and any new teachings coming from the ascended masters. And this becomes a problem, of course, because that means that they can actually be promoting something that was valid enough in the past. But it's not that it isn't valid, but it's just not the most effective way to grow spiritually, because things have moved on and new things have been released. I mean, it's the good old story about the Amish people in America who are still doing farming like they did in the 1800s and refuse to use modern farming methods. It's just, backward looking. But then there's another issue that needs to be addressed in this context, and that is that as the collective consciousness is being raised, as we are moving into the age of Aquarius, as we are moving into the golden age of Saint Germain, more and more people become open to spirituality and to walking a spiritual path. And what these traditions talk about, that you need a human guru that is qualified, what they're talking about is a direct personal relationship with a guru. So traditionally in India, for example, a guru has an ashram, which is a house where you can live and maybe do some work also. So as a student or chela, you come to the ashram and you submit yourself to the guru, and you basically pledge to, you become a slave, essentially. Chela is the word that's often used. It means slave, because you submit yourself to the guru. And there's value in this in the sense that the guru, if it's a valid guru, can help you question your ego, challenge your ego. But this requires a guru who has experience and who has the time and attention to have personal contact with students. And first of all, there are a limited number of gurus. Second of all, no guru has unlimited time and attention span. So if you look at millions of people are becoming open to the spiritual path, they can't all go to India and find a personal guru. There just aren't enough gurus to go around. So in the Aquarian age, the only practical thing is that people find different ways to grow that doesn't require a human guru, physical guru. And the obvious alternative is the ascended masters. That's why they have given all these teachings about how you can use the teachings, you can use the practical tools to follow a spiritual path that takes you higher in consciousness until your intuition has become so clear that you establish a personal relationship with the Ascended Masters. They are not limited by time and space. They do have attention for many, many people, probably unlimited numbers of people if it comes down to it, but there are also many Ascended Masters. So this is the practical solution for the Age of Aquarius, where you are not dependent on a limited number of physical gurus. And so just from a purely practical viewpoint, this old model of a physical guru is it's not in sync with the times. And that doesn't mean it's not can't be valid. If you have a valid guru, yes, I think it can be valid enough. But personally, I have been involved with 2 spiritual organizations that claim to have a guru that was in a high level of consciousness, but I wasn't personal students of any of them. I had very limited contact. I had no contact with the Maharishi in the Transcendental Meditation. I had a little bit of personal contact with Elizabeth Care Prophet in the Summit Lighthouse and benefited greatly from her advice, but I was never formally her personal student. And so the path that I have followed is one of minimal interaction with physical gurus and really using the teachings of the Ascended Masters to establish my personal relationship with them. And that is a path that I would say the majority of spiritual seekers have the potential to follow that path. And so, as I said, it is a valid path for one thing, but it's also the practical solution to the problem, you might say, which really isn't a problem, but the fact that so many people are awakening to the spiritual side of life.